fires that are burning out of control, with one moving closer. Our Michelle Gassoub has more on the challenges for people seeking shelter.
Fort St. John is bursting at the seams. Over 1,400 evacuees from Fort Nelson are sheltering here.
Everybody wants a hug all the time, so it's good, but still unnerving.
This arena turned evacuation center has become a place of reunions.
Work on the reserve, FNFN, and when I see the kids and stuff, like, my heart's just relieved, because you're like, are they okay? It's like a big deal to us.
But also a scene of frustration. Hotels are full, and those seeking shelter here are being told to head elsewhere.
It's definitely frustrating for a lot of these people in line who have been kicked out of their hotels. It's become a first come, first serve.
Of the 4,700 people ordered to evacuate Fort Nelson, around 50 have stayed behind, including the mayor.
Helicopters will be bucketing out to the hot spots, and as long as the wind doesn't come up from the west, it won't blow any closer to the town.
Others post daily live streams of what they're seeing behind evacuation lines.
We are getting some water on our windows. We cruise, so that's a good sign.
The fire grew from 53 square kilometers Monday to 84 on Tuesday and is now burning 1.5 kilometers from town. The mayor says some structures outside of town have been lost, but the catastrophic conditions officials warned of didn't materialize.
They figured by 6:30 there might not have been a Fort Nelson anymore. I'm hoping it's supposed to rain the next 3 days. I'm really hoping we get the rain.
Some here wish they could make the drive north to protect what they can.
I said I'd work for free, I just said so, but they won't let you come back, so what do?
Taking in the livestock, taking in people, offering your guys' homes, and just being there to support the community. Fort St. John has always been #1 for that.
In a city with little to do but wait and worry, evacuees watch the wind. There's a second fire in this area that is threatening homes. The wildfire near the Doig River First Nation that forced the evacuation of that entire community last night. That's around 40 kilometers northeast of here in Fort St. John, so people are concerned they've had to evacuate once. They may have to evacuate again. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Fort St. John.
Meanwhile, the city of Prince George says it has taken in more than 150 evacuees from Fort Nelson. This comes, as Michelle mentioned, numerous wildfires burn out of control in parts of our province. The BC government says preparations are underway. But as Bill Puri explains, one big question, has enough been done leading up to this season?
Fierce flames ravaging BC's northeast corner are a likely indication the province is in for another long haul this summer.
Here we are, not even at May long weekend. We've already got thousands of people evacuated. It's a sign of the times to come.
Early intense fire, like what's burning now, is uncommon, but not unprecedented. The province's goal is to be ready for it.
We stood up the wildfire service year-round. We brought on more equipment. Functionally, at the provincial level, we're standing up an army.
Some forestry experts say that's good, but not good enough.
We need to do more prescribed burning. Prescribed burning is probably the most cost-effective way of trying to start addressing this problem. We can burn large areas, once we plan them and we organize properly, to reduce the fuel hazard in significant areas.
In the last 3 years, BC has had two of its worst fire seasons ever. Last year alone, it spent $1 billion on fire suppression.
There's been well-documented recommendations since the 2003 Okanagan Mountain Park fire that we needed to get on with more prevention and more mitigation on Crown lands. And really that's has not happened to the degree that it needs to happen.
It's estimated BC needs millions of hectares of mitigation, which means billions of dollars of investment.
We're spending and have been spending 9 times more than the previous government around ensuring that fire preparation work is done in communities right across British Columbia.
Whether enough of that work has been done in time for this year's fires is impossible to say until the season is over.
There is more for all of us to do. Now is the time for communities to fire smart around properties, fire smart around their communities.
The first evacuation orders this year were issued in mid-April, in a season expected to stretch into October. Fire season used to be July and August. Belle Puri, CBC News, Vancouver.
Karis Hogg joins us now with a first look at the weather, and you have an overall provincial picture on the fire danger.
Yeah, so taking a look at the BC fire danger rating here, you can see that the northeast corner of the province is either under high or extreme fire danger. Fort Nelson is, about there. And they did get some rain today. And also looking at their forecast tonight into tomorrow, it looks good. 60% chance of showers for Fort Nelson this evening. Risk of a thunderstorm as well early this evening. And then 60% chance of showers for Fort Nelson tomorrow afternoon as well. And also not a lot of wind. And so that's good. Although there will be a lot of smoke. There is an air quality statement out for this corner of the province because of those fires. So taking a look quickly at the precipitation forecast for the whole province, we are under a high ridge of pressure, which is going to start to break down Thursday into Friday. There is some precipitation moving through the center of the province, but really we don't get a lot of precipitation over the province until Friday into Saturday, it looks like. And quickly taking a look, satellite and radar for last night and today for Metro Vancouver, just very dry. And we will continue to have dry conditions on the south coast. But quickly looking at tonight and into early tomorrow, 14 this evening, low of 10, and we're looking at another dry day tomorrow. I'll have more later in the show.
All right. Thanks, Karis. Close to 1 million Canadians affected by a cyber attack on LifeLabs are finally getting their payouts from a class action lawsuit. It's not a lot. The amount? $7.86, lower than initially expected because of how many people signed up to be part of the settlement. KPMG, which is administering those payments, says people who submitted valid claims will get their money by e-transfer. If you were valid and requested a check, they'll take $2 off for a processing fee. The lawsuit was launched after a 2019 data breach at LifeLabs that allowed hackers to access the personal information of millions of customers. A heads up for those of you who like chips. Frito-Lay Canada is recalling 2 kinds of its snacks because of a possible risk of salmonella contamination. Look at this. The recall applies to Sun Chips Harvest Cheddar flavored multigrain snacks and bags of Munchies Original Snack Mix. All sizes of the Sun Chips Harvest Cheddar with best before dates between June 18th and August 22nd of this year are affected. The affected Munchies mix have best buy dates between July 16th and September 10th of next year. If you have these snacks, you're asked to throw them out, and you can contact Frito-Lay Canada about getting reimbursed. No illnesses have been reported so far. Salmonella can cause diarrhea, fever, and abdominal cramps. The province has now launched a 2-year, $2 million pilot program to integrate before and after school childcare. That plan is meant to give parents and guardians more childcare options for less money.
There are very few parents who work at a place where the hours are 9 to 3. And so even when your kid is done daycare and goes into the school system, you're still looking for that critical care both before and after school care.
The program will start in 3 school districts, including Chilliwack, Nanaimo, Ladysmith, and Nechako Lakes this fall. A new political poll in BC shows the popularity of the governing NDP is ebbing. It finds if an election was held today, Premier David Eby's party would most likely win government. But as Chad Pawson explains, he would be most challenged by a leader from another party that is not the official opposition.
David Eby's NDP are leading in the polls, but he's paying close attention to those numbers because they're dropping. The BC Conservatives, despite having only 2 seats in the legislature, are polling second, just 6 points behind. David Eby's now going after the party.
I think it's important for me to make sure that people understand the choice that's on the ballot in the period between now and the election. There's no question, and I've been clear from the beginning, the Conservatives are a real threat. They are going to cost British Columbians in very tangible ways.
Eby can no longer ignore or dismiss the BC Conservatives under leader John Rustad, especially if what voters are telling pollsters holds true for the upcoming election in October. The latest survey data shows if the election was held today, 40% of voters would vote NDP, but 34% would vote Conservative. With just 13% voting BC United, they are the official opposition with 26 seats in the legislature. Since November, the party has lost 4 points, while the Conservatives have gained 8, and the Greens 1. BC Conservative leader John Rustad says he's not surprised by his party's numbers.
The real big thing about this is it is grassroots. It is the grassroots movement. It's people coming forward and saying we want change, we want common sense, we want a government that is going to deliver for people and fight for the average everyday person. And that's what I'm hearing time and time again.
Caught out in all of this is BC United leader Kevin Falcon. He's having to defend his party's role in the legislature. The grind of opposing the government is not helping his polling numbers. Now he's having to entertain talks with the BC Conservatives over possible vote splitting.
Yes, we've engaged in some discussions. We've got emissaries from both parties that are having discussions to see if we can find common ground, recognizing that the real enemy is the NDP government.
So what else is at play here? If you ask Kevin Falcon, names. He says the BC Conservatives are buoyed by having the same name as the federal opposition. So he's facing a 5-month sprint to get united in better parlance. In the meantime, David Eby hopes any confusion will help deliver him a second term. Chad Pawson, CBC News, Victoria.
Celebrated Canadian author Alice Munro has died at the age of 92. She won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2013 and spent many years here in BC. Deanna Sumanog-Johnson has more on Munro's life and long career.
Someone, the person crying out, kill me now.
She wrote about the wonders and disasters in the lives of everyday people, but Alice Munro's short stories were anything but ordinary.
And I don't write about secret agents or people who have psychic experiences or something like this. But I never consider these people ordinary.
Alice Munro was born in Wingham, Ontario, the kind of small town where many of her stories took place. She married her first husband, Jim Munro, at 20 and soon became a mother of 3 children.
I just had very, very short times when I could write because I had little kids and no help. And so I couldn't possibly see a year ahead of me when I could write a novel. So I decided, well, while I'm learning how to write a novel, I'll write a few short stories.
Munro's life also provided inspiration for the content of her stories.
Of course, it's my mother I'm thinking of. My mother, as she was in those dreams, saying, it's nothing, just this little tremor.
She lost her mother at a young age. Her daughter Catherine died when she was just a day old. That sense of loss trickled into her stories as they won over readers and literary prizes year after year.
Gift of knowledge, the most priceless gift you can give your children.
Munro's stories also inspired dozens of film and TV adaptations, including Sarah Polley's Oscar-nominated Away From Her.
We've had a good life together. Those are your words, Fiona, not mine. That is not your sweater.
The biggest prize in Munro's life came in October 2013. At age 82, she became the first Canadian to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. She responded to the honor in her classic self-deprecating style.
This is what you work towards. And so you wouldn't be so ungracious as to say, oh, it's all a terrible nuisance, would you?
Munro's win was celebrated around the country, and the sales of her story collections skyrocketed. It was the crown jewel in the career of the woman who, in telling private, intimate tales, ignited the imagination of the world. Deanna Sumanog-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
The Vancouver Canucks will be without a key defenseman when they face off against the Edmonton Oilers in Game 4 of their second-round playoff series. The NHL suspended Carson Soucy for 1 game for a cross-check he delivered to the face of Oilers captain Connor McDavid after McDavid slashed Soucy. It all happened after time expired in the Canucks Game 3 win. Abbotsford native Noah Juulsen, who's been in 1 playoff game so far this season, is going to take Soucy's place in the lineup. Arturs Shelofs will make his 7th straight start in goal for the Canucks. and Calvin Pickard, who made his playoff debut. In the third period of Sunday's game will be the Oilers' backstop. Puck drops at 6:30 our time at Rogers Place in Edmonton. After decades of Indigenous cultural burning being banned, that ancient practice is now being revived. After the break, we're going to show you how some BC First Nations are doing preventative wildfire work. Stick around. Wildfire season has hit BC with a fury once again. And as crews fight to contain the flames, we want to take a look at some of the work that was done before to make our forest floors more resilient to fire. For decades, the Indigenous practice of cultural burning was banned. Now that ancient knowledge is being revived. Brady Strachan got rare access to the front line of one of those burns.
This is just the final turn on protecting the reserve, helping nature out like we used to back in the day.
Indigenous communities are in a race to protect themselves. They're bringing back a tradition that was banned for decades.
We have to learn from our mistakes. Now we have to correct them.
We got ticket 4-pack. I'm gonna need some more burners here, you guys.
We've been invited to the Bridge River Indian Band, or Hoiston, about 300 kilometers north of Vancouver, where a big plan is unfolding. A diverse team of band members and provincial firefighters is gathering for something unusual. They're not going to stop a fire, they're going to start one with what's called a cultural burn or prescribed burn.
Safety is the #1 thing for today.
The threat of wildfire is always here and growing. Just last year, the community had to evacuate.
So let's help each other out here. Let's get this done here so we can go to another community and keep doing this all around Lillooet so that when fire does come around, we don't have to worry about this kind of stuff anymore. Because frankly, last year I got kicked out of this place twice.
Raymond James is leading this crew that will help keep the fire in check. It's not the first time they've done this, but today's burn will be the biggest and most complex.
How are you feeling about today?
Today's, not gonna lie, it's nervous. Yeah. So, big time thing here. Usually just doing a lot of small burns, nothing to this big content here. So this is just the final turn on protecting the reserve and helping nature out like we used to back in the day.
All right, David, here we go. Let's do this.
Today's conditions are perfect for a burn. The right temperature, winds, and humidity. The team will carefully manage fire on 151 hectares around the community, lighting it on the ground and from the air.
It's looking good in some places, and yeah, we're up to the road there, so we're going to continue on, heading to the south.
See the smoke popping up? Just faintly, that's a good sign.
Colleen Ross is a veteran wildland fire ecologist hired by Hoiston to help plan this early spring burn. They're using flames to clear the land of tinder, fuel for wildfires.
How's it going so far in the day now that we're going?
Yeah, it looks really good. You can tell by the smoke. It's getting up and over the mountains, and it'll drift off to where the communities aren't.
Getting to this point was no small feat, a complicated process of preparation and collaboration with many partners, including fire departments and the BC government.
We started planning this time last year, actually.
So it's a year of planning to get to the stage where we're lighting
That's
the fire.
right. This is the hard stuff. We're ripping off the Band-Aid. We're like just taking off a huge chunk while we can and while we have the people.
It burned really nice in here. Holy cow.
Midway through the burn, we're taken to see a swath of forest the fire has already blackened. Burn boss Bradley Jack is our guide. Hoiston has tried to do a burn here before, but that plan had to be aborted because the conditions weren't right.
It's been 5 years now since that burn plan, and it's been on the back burner.
There's a lot of coordination to pull this off.
Yes, there is. There's a lot of coordination. It takes time. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years to get a burn plan together, and then all the science and stuff like that.
This is more than just wildfire prevention. It's a reconnection with a cultural practice and expertise that was forbidden.
As settlers moved out west in the 1800s, British Columbia became the first province to ban this kind of cultural burning, and the knowledge was lost to First Nation communities. But in recent years, Bridge River Indian Band has brought it back, and now other communities are starting it too.
One of the things I learned from fire is it can be your friend and it can be your enemy.
At the nearby Ashcroft Indian Band, another community is learning to change its relationship with fire. Colleen Ross is here to help them on their journey. It's not an easy thing to do. 7 years ago, an out-of-control fire devastated the First Nation, scorching the landscape, burning homes, and leaving the community fearful and scarred.
Hey, I want one of those for my garden.
Those memories are still fresh for Sharp Hittman and her family. So, any fire here is scary, even a prescribed burn.
A fire can get out of control. But having said that, with all the people that are here today to control the fire, I guess I can live with it. Yeah, I'll be okay.
Climate change is becoming a bigger part of life here, where summer temperatures are often the hottest in Canada. Pittman says the community needs to evolve.
When you have catastrophes that happen, everybody learns something from it. And I think that's the big take, is we have to learn from our mistakes. Now we have to correct them. And this is a way of correcting it.
So who has never dug garden before? Yeah, okay, awesome.
This community is starting fresh on prescribed burning. Today, they're learning the basics, like how to dig a fire guard, stripping down the land to the soil to stop fire from spreading.
When we're handling drip torches, big thing is wearing sleeves down, obviously, leather gloves on.
Even starting a burn using these drip torches is new to everyone here, including local volunteer firefighters and 3 teens from the community. 19-year-old Darius Kirkpatrick is keen to protect his band's future.
I like this, like how we're doing it on the land, so we can learn from it and live longer without having that problem or having that worry. And I'm really happy to have like all of these new kids get into it. Yeah, it makes me feel proud.
Today's session is just a practice run, but a big step towards a larger goal. The band is planning a significant burn next year, and experts say other communities across Canada need to follow their example. This year, there are 61 prescribed or cultural burns planned in BC, which would treat 47 square kilometers of forest. To put that in context, look south to the U.S. state of New Jersey. It's more than 40 times smaller than BC, but last year the state treated 5 times as much land with prescribed burns.
So this is an area that had been mechanically thinned about 10 years ago, approximately.
Matthew Bourbonnais once fought fires for a living. Now an assistant professor at UBC's Kelowna campus, he studies how we can better prepare for them. He's taking us into this forest, not far from where a catastrophic fire destroyed close to 200 homes last August. He says prescribed burning could help stop it from happening again.
It's not something that we might do, it's something that we have to do. And we just haven't quite got there.
And you say we have to do it. Why do we have to do it?
So it's almost like, I don't want to say we're accepting the worst case scenario, but if we aren't moving more towards that proactive mitigation, we're just doing the same thing over and over and over again, and we're going to get the same outcomes.
We're kind of setting ourselves up for potential for disaster.
Yeah, pretty much. Fire suppression will always be a part of it. We're always going to need to respond to some fires. But if we can create landscapes that are more resilient to fire, then maybe the impacts of a lot of those fires aren't going to be the same.
Back in Hoyston, the flames are now right behind homes, but under the careful control of the team. The burn is clearing the forest floor of so much fire fuel, and it's still intense. As we walked into the woods to get these images, we got a little too close.
Awesome. Right on, thanks a bunch there, bro.
But Raymond James is pleased with the progress his crews have made.
At the end of the day, you've burned off all of this fire fuel really close to these people's homes.
Yes. So with that being said, it's better to do it now than have the summer weather, us out here at 50 degrees and trying to fight this fire when the flames are 4 times as high and the trees are all getting scorched. Better to do it now while we have control.
As evening approaches, fire has burned the land right around the community. Their homes now, hopefully, safer this summer, with plans to share what they've learned.
We want to start doing this for other communities as well. It's very important because, as you see, the fire's coming a lot sooner. Times have changed and the weather has too.
The government nearly ended this traditional use of fire, but it's slowly returning at a time when it's more important than ever. Brady Strachan, CBC News in Hoyston, British Columbia.
Pro-Palestinian encampments are on university campuses across this country and in the U.S. After the break, a closer look at how they're being funded and who's organizing them. Stick around. Pro-Palestinian protesters have been gathering at Vancouver City Hall today ahead of the Burrard Street Bridge and City Hall being lit up tonight in blue and white. That will celebrate Israel's Independence Day.
We're here today because the City of Vancouver has chosen to light up City Hall and Burrard Bridge blue in celebration of the Zionist state's 76th Independence Day. We're not sure what they're celebrating independence from.
There's people being slaughtered in Gaza, and our City Hall is celebrating Israel. I'm so angry, so angry.
Members of the group Independent Jewish Voices Vancouver argues the illumination, quote, sends a signal that the city endorses the suffering of Palestinians and the violations of international law being committed by Israel. The city says the decision to light up City Hall for a national day or an Independence Day, quote, neither implies or expresses support for the politics of that country. Other encampments have popped up around the country and south of the border. Ben McCoo looks into some of them to get to the bottom of what fuels them, community organizing or outside influences.
You have the opportunity to leave and leave now.
So one of the narratives about the student protests that started in New York and then spread across North America is that outsiders are backing them. Take New York City Mayor Eric Adams' claim about tents, for example.
Why is everybody's tent the same? Was there a fire sale on those tents? There's some organizing going on. You know, there's a well-concerted organizing effort. And what's the goal of that organizing?
To him, there was some outside force involved in supplying protesters. It helped drive this question: is somebody or something actually funding the protests? And how much do they even cost? So we fact-checked this for ourselves to see what's happening here in Canada. So far, we've seen at least 11 pro-Palestinian student protests on campuses across the country. Generally, they want their schools to disclose all investments and divest from companies the groups say support Israel's actions against Palestinians. Some also want the schools to cut ties with Israeli institutions. CBC reporters on the ground have said the protests are mostly student-led, but count alumni, faculty, and community members in their ranks.
Students from different schools are starting to support the encampment.
These students say they've got a lot of supplies and they have a lot of energy.
Solicited donations. I saw some parents coming by with, pots full of food.
Now, outside protesters have bolstered numbers at times. So I went down to the University of Toronto encampment on its second day to see for myself. From what I gleaned, the protesters were largely students. I talked to a professor who's been observing. He's a member of the Jewish Faculty Network. So you've actually seen students you've taught?
Oh yes, many, yeah.
There's also this idea that, this is somehow being funded by groups linked to Hamas and other types of dark money. Who's paying for this?
There's no evidence that I've seen, no credible evidence that there's any kind of organizing like the ones you mentioned that have been funding this. And you see, if you wait at the gate, you see people from the community coming and donating food.
So let's talk money and supplies, what these protesters are asking for, and what it appears they're actually getting. We looked into how student groups and encampments in Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, and Vancouver were fundraising. All have asked primarily for physical donations, initially food, clothing, batteries, kitchen supplies. 5 student groups we found asked for money via e-transfer or cash. 3 of those were for potential legal defense funds, while 1 accepted cash donations at a medic tent. We asked them about where those money donations are going. 2 responded. U of T Occupy for Palestine said e-transfers pay for food and extra supplies that haven't been donated. And INSAF, a student group at the University of Ottawa, said it was collecting money for supplies at the encampment, which were coming from all angles, mostly from community members who donate to help our cause. Critics are also alleging the student protesters are part of a conspiracy involving secret money and links to Hamas. It centers on the National Students for Justice in Palestine, one of the main pro-Palestinian campus groups in the US with chapters and allies in Canada. It's been accused of direct links to Hamas, but to be clear, neither US nor Canadian law enforcement has charged any of its members for supporting Hamas. Another allegation, the protests are financed by billionaire George Soros. The far right uses this stereotype of a wealthy Jewish patron secretly funding perceived left-wing causes, like the BLM protests of 2020.
Democrat Party has gone so far left that nobody knows what to do. It's become radical resistance. You ever see their signs? Resist. They'll go to a person holding a sign who gets paid by Soros or somebody.
The irony of these latest allegations is that Soros is a proud Jewish American and a Holocaust survivor. The argument is that Soros's Open Society Foundations has paid to start the encampments. But they're citing grants awarded in 2022, 2 years before the encampments were even conceived. The grants also come with a description from OSF, none of which specifies student protest funding. Open Society Foundations told us it has funded a broad spectrum of U.S. groups that have advocated for the rights of Palestinians and Israelis, and says their funding is both publicly disclosed and fully compliant with U.S. laws. McGill and U of T have both claimed people unaffiliated with their schools are causing problems at the protests. Some call that the outside agitator.
So the concept of the outside agitator is one that we see over and over again in American student history.
I spoke to Angus Johnston, historian of student activism and professor at City University of New York.
Nonviolence is the answer. If you go back to the civil rights movement, if you go back to the Vietnam War movement, the idea behind the accusation of an outside agitator is at its heart the idea that the community that is rising up, the community that is engaging in this organizing, wouldn't be doing it if not for being spurred on, manipulated, pressured from outside.
It seems like whenever there's a mass movement that's disagreed with, these things are quick to come out. I can assure you, I have very little money. And I'm putting my life on hold to be here.
Did anyone, pay you or influence you to come here yourself, or?
Of course not. I am even appalled that you ask. I'm sorry, because that's, again, I'm here as a moral obligation to the Palestinian people. I haven't been paid in any sort of way.
And remember the tent theory? MP Kevin Vong insinuated the ones at U of T were part of a broader conspiracy that cost $400 each.
And last night, there was about 120 of us who stayed overnight here at this encampment.
And your tents, where are you getting them from?
My understanding is that they were purchased at Walmart. Costco, the cheapest option. I'm not sure. Some of them have been donated. Some of them were purchased by community members.
In fact, I had already Googled cheap tents, which took me to an Uber Eats link for this model from Walmart. Delivered to you for $48.
They're not expensive tents, and the idea that, we can see that they bought a bunch of the same kind of tent, and that is evidence of some sort of a conspiracy. Well, what you do is you go on Amazon, and you find a good cheap tent, and then when you're going to check out, you click 6 instead of 1. You click for however many tents you have enough money to buy. It's not a conspiracy, it's just the logical way to do this.
I put the question of dark money directly to that student organizer.
I think ultimately, we've had just an outpouring of, supplies that are being donated and people are purchasing with their own funds.
Whether or not they're being funded, these types of protests, they're cheap.
We're talking about expenses on the level of hundreds of dollars, maybe a couple of thousand if you've got a really big movement that's lasting for a while. And talking about an amount of money that either can come from the students themselves or can readily be raised from just local supporters.
To New York now, and a fiery day in the criminal trial of Donald Trump. The prosecution's key witness, Michael Cohen, was back on the stand. This time, he was grilled by Trump's defense team. Chris Glover takes us through what happened.
A tourist photo in the White House like millions before, but this one of Michael Cohen is key evidence. Prosecutors say it proves Cohen was there in February 2017 to meet then President Trump.
Michael, did you get some sleep last night?
Back for day 2, Cohen's testimony was corroborated not just with photos, but also accounting documents, testifying he fabricated these invoices of $35,000 per month, most of the checks signed by Donald Trump. Were any of those checks, in fact, for work during the months described in those check stubs, the prosecution asked Cohen? No, ma'am, Cohen replied.
You had a very mild-mannered, cooperative,
yes ma'am, no ma'am type of witness, which is not the person that he is.
They say I'm Mr. Trump's pit bull, that I am his, right-hand man.
He is a racist.
A lot has been made about Cohen's calm candor before prosecutors. The disbarred lawyer, known as a hothead, has served jail time for lying under oath. So the prosecution leaning on documents like this one, outlining the alleged reimbursement scheme to back up his testimony.
We'd have to be able to show that Donald Trump not only knew about this whole process, but intended for it to violate the law.
The reimbursements disguised as legal expenses instead of their true nature, the prosecution is arguing, payments to suppress a catastrophic story of an affair and help Trump win the White House. Anticipating attacks on Cohen's credibility, the prosecution leaned in first, getting Cohen to acknowledge his checkered past. Questioned for his repeated lying, Cohen testified he did it out of loyalty and in order to protect Trump.
This is a man who is clearly on a mission for personal revenge, and who is widely known as a witness who has trouble with the truth. Thank you.
Trump finally getting some support from political allies at court, while inside all afternoon, the defense painting Cohen as a Trump-hating, money-hungry liar.
You ask me questions, I'm not allowed to respond.
Yet more bad news for Trump, an appeals court rejecting his attempt to have his much-hated gag order repealed. Chris Glover, CBC News, New York.
After the break, we'll take you to the Northwest Territories, where people are trying to save a rare kind of snake. Stick around. The wildfire season is off to an early start in parts of the country, as we've shown you. Several communities and animals are under threat. Red-sided garter snakes in the Northwest Territories emerge from hibernation to mate in the spring. But with a serious amount of their habitat torched by last year's blazes, the snakes are at even further risk. A student from BC is working in the Fort Smith area to help protect and conserve that species.
So there is a snake right there. So I'm Johanna Stewart. I am starting my master's research looking at red-sided garter snakes and particularly the post-fire impacts on this population. We are close to Fort Smith right now in the Fort Smith area, but in Wood Buffalo National Park at the Salt River Day Use area. This is one of the study sites that I am looking at. There is a known kind of resident population of red-sided garter snakes that overwinters here and comes out in the springtime. So we are looking to study those snakes as they are coming out of hibernation, trying to count them. We take some data from them around length, weight, give them a little pit tag or a personal identification tag. We have a really special population here in the Northwest Territories. And it also means that this species is vulnerable. We don't have the same number of snakes since we're at the very northern edge of their range. There's fewer snakes here. They have less kind of available habitat that meets their requirements. And so they are at risk when a significant event like a fire burns up their habitat, or if they lose significant numbers of snakes in their population. It's hard for them to recover from that. And so it's really important that we are studying this species, studying the impacts of the fire, and trying to figure out what are the appropriate management actions, what we can be doing to help conserve this species, to protect their habitat, and make sure that they can recover from events like last year's fire. We can see there's so many trees that have burned and fallen. Their habitat has just definitely changed. It's pretty devastating. It's really hard to see a landscape that has been changed so much by fire. I mean, we know obviously that fire is a natural part of the ecosystem in a boreal forest, but just the extent, the amount of area, and the severity of the burn that we are seeing where forests are completely gone, that's really hard to see. But I think it's also really important to see. It's really important to be looking at that, to be thinking about what the effects are for wildlife and for communities.
Karis Hogg is back with our BC-wide weather forecast. Not a lot of rain out there.
No, Dan, it's been a pretty dry province over the last 24 hours. As we can see, looking here at the satellite and radar over the past 24 hours for the province, a little bit of precipitation in the center of the province and the southern interior, a little bit up in the northeast. Fort St. John got a little bit of rain. Fort Nelson got a little bit of rain, which is good news for them. The forecast for Fort Nelson actually over the next day is looking favorable. There's a 60% chance of showers overnight in Fort Nelson, and then again tomorrow afternoon, also a risk of a thunderstorm. Not a lot of wind as well, so that is good news. There will, however, be quite a bit of smoke in the northeast, and there is a special air quality statement issued for the northeast because of those fires that are burning near Fort Nelson. So looking into the future at the precipitation for the province, we can see that there is not a lot of rain over the next couple days, but then we get to Friday and it does look pretty wet. This high pressure ridge is going to start breaking down on Thursday. But now the thing about here is there's lots of rain in much of the province. The south coast is going to stay quite dry. So Vancouver and Victoria, as everywhere else is getting rain, is not really going to get the rain, is what it's looking like. So if we take a look now at some temperatures tomorrow, we can see that a little unsettled in the north part of the province. We got scattered showers, Prince George, Williams Lake, Bella Coola, Terrace. The southern part of the province, dry, again, staying dry. Whistler, sun and cloud and 20, Kamloops, sun and cloud, 25, same with Kelowna. And so when we look at the 5-day Metro Vancouver weather forecast, tomorrow another warm day and dry, 18 near the water, but 22 inland. Thursday is when we might see a little bit of precipitation on the south coast. 40% chance of showers on Thursday, but then Friday and through the weekend for Metro Vancouver is looking dry and, you know, fairly warm, 16, 17, 18 degrees.
Almost like we're approaching summer.
Almost, kind of, sort of. Yep.
Thanks, Karis.
You're welcome.
A Saskatchewan farmer makes a surprising discovery in his field from out of this world. We'll show you more next.
A Saskatchewan farmer made a surprising discovery from out of this world. Discarded parts of a rocket, otherwise known as space junk.
As Jason Warwick shows us, while the space race heats up across the world, responsibility for cleans up gets a bit murky.
I'm not a space junkie or anything like that. This is just what we found in our field, so.
As a farmer in rural Saskatchewan, Barry Sawchuk is used to removing rocks and weeds from his fields, but he recently discovered this 2-meter wide, 40-kilogram heap of twisted, burnt metal.
My oldest son and I were out driving around just checking fields, see where we could start seeding, and we came across the largest object, It's laying out in the field. Originally we just thought it was garbage.
But the 16 layers of metal and webbing made him suspect.
We know this is the inside because on the outside, it's got a it's sort of, whether this is insulation, I have no idea. Don't build spaceships for a living. I farm.
An astronomy professor traced it to a re-entry of a rocket from private company SpaceX back in February. While rare, she notes more large chunks of metal from space have been found recently in Australia and Washington state. This space debris smashed through the roof of a Florida home. NASA determined it came from the International Space Station.
It's really just luck that it did not hit, right? Like if that had hit in the middle of Regina or New York City, like you said, it very easily could have killed someone.
Samantha Lawler says launches and re-entries of spacecraft are now a daily occurrence, so that risk is increasing rapidly and better regulations are urgently needed. Sawchuk reached out to SpaceX, but no one answered his call.
I think if I can, I'm going to sell it.
Sawchuk says he plans to donate some of the money to rebuild his local hockey rink. Jason Warwick, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Well, thank you for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and at our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And Tanya Fletcher will have your next local news at 11 o'clock online tonight. Watch on our website, YouTube, and on CBC Gem. Good night. Go Canucks, go.
Go Canucks, go!